Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Country Education Partnership's online professional development program, the Winter Series. Although I must say it feels a little bit like it's still autumn. But anyway, it's the Winter Series. My name is Gary Allen, and I am pleased to be hosting today's session. The Country Education Partnership acknowledges the owners and custodians of the land, rivers, sea, ancestors, and spirits. I'm speaking to you today from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eastern Maar, and I pay my respects to their ancestors past and present, as I extend that same respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples, particularly any who may be with us today. The focus of the third session in the Winter Series today is wellbeing and effective communication tips for leaders. As usual, the session will last 1 hour, going no later than 5 p.m. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat room and we will endeavour to get back to you today. Towards the end of the session, there will be a survey in the chat room, and we encourage you to fill that survey in as it's important to us. The program is being recorded, and therefore you can at a later date look at the session or any other sessions in the past. It is now my pleasure to hand over to Nigel, who is standing in for Mark, and I think he's probably going to update us about Energy Breakthrough. Anyway, he's going to give us an update on recent CEP activities.
Yeah, thanks.
Future CEP, I should say.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks everyone. So I'm Nigel Preston. I've been working with the CEP team on and off for 20 years, mainly on the Energy Breakthrough program, which is a schools program all about teaching young people about STEAM activities and giving them a hands-on vehicle to engage with this in their school settings. So we have robotics, we have push carts, we have human powered vehicles, which are pedal powered vehicles, have to have 3 wheels or more. You might have seen those around in some schools. Or we also have electric and pedal electric vehicles as well. So from CEP's point of view, we oversee all of the rules and all of the safety aspects of the event. We work with schools from across Victoria and beyond who are participating in the event, but mostly Victoria, in them helping to prepare for their entries. And this is a lot of rural and regional schools across different areas of the state. And they'll use it in all sorts of different ways. So some schools will use it as a leadership program for some schools. Other schools use it as actually a carrot to retain and engage school refusers or kids that just aren't really that interested in some of the academic parts of school life. They can use Energy Breakthrough as a carrot and a program for them. So there's 3 main parts of what they're assessed on. They do a presentation, public speaking. So some of the effective communication tips from today will probably be very helpful for the students. They have a workshop style discussion for what they've built, and then they hit the track for some competition. And some of those competitions might be a few minutes and right up to a 24-hour relay. And that all comes together in Maryborough in November each year. So if anyone's interested in wanting to find out a little bit more, we do have a website. There's links off the CEP website. So if you go to cep.org.au and click the Energy Breakthrough side, you'll be able to find out a little bit more about that. But that's what we've been working on at the moment. We have 90 schools participating in the program, and I just wanted to share that with you. It's one of the main CEP projects that's been going since 1991 and continues into 2026. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Nigel. And could I add that Energy Breakthrough really is a signature program for CEP. And I encourage you, if you haven't participated, to look into it. And Nigel really has been a significant contributor to that program over that period of time. So thanks again, Nigel, for your continued involvement.
Thank you.
I'd like to hand over now to Tess, who's going to facilitate today's session. Thanks, Tess.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again to the CEP for asking me to host. This session is going to be very interesting for me as a leader in a small rural school. We're always looking for wellbeing and effective communication tips, not just for us principals, but for the teachers that carry many leadership positions as well as teach in the schools. So we have two fabulous speakers this afternoon, Melissa Lozanovski from the Bien Collective and Amy Green from the Wellness Strategy. Melissa, we're going to hand to you first.
Thanks, Tess.
We just share screen. Off you go.
That's working for everyone?
Yep, we've got that.
Awesome, fantastic. It's an absolute pleasure to join you all this evening. And I feel like with only 2 weeks or 1.5 weeks, 7-8 days left of the term, I feel like the wellbeing focus for a session couldn't have come at a more timely moment. I sit here today as the founding director of Bien Collective, but in the last 18 months have hung up my boots as a principal, and my last stint in the leadership world was the founding principal of a brand new school. So I sit here and I empathise with not only the leaders but the teachers who are feeling the full impact and the effects of the exhaustion that comes with the end of term. And I appreciate that the struggle is real. And if you've taken time out of your day to join us, I think it's really important to give yourself a pat on the back because sometimes stopping just to smell the roses is something that we're not good at doing. So today I'm not going to throw anything, crazy or new at you. I thought about, what can I do in 15 minutes to make the most impact, and knowing just how much the fatigue is real at this time of the year and how much our focus at Bien Collective is on wellbeing of leaders, educators and the organisations in which we support. I thought it might be a really good idea just to provide you some gentle reminders. It's going to be nothing that's going to blow your mind. It's going to be things that you will have heard before, but sometimes I think when you're in the rat race and life and the hustle and the bustle of the hamster wheel, it's really nice to just pause and be reminded of what's really, really important. So I just want to first and foremost give you a visual of what it's like to sit in your schools, in your respective spaces, whether that be in the leadership world, from prim class to middle leaders, and to also the teachers in the space, because this is the best depiction of what it really truly looks like for us, a day in the life of someone who works in a school. And as we know, there's this beautiful iceberg, which is all of the forward-facing things that we see. But it's just so important to stop and acknowledge that beneath the surface of those waters, there's often quite a deeper narrative that we are all kind of living each and every day. And it's not just about the tangibles and things that you can see. It's about trust. It's about culture, resilience, relationships. It's about being present in the moment. It's about making sure you're taking care of your well-being and the well-being of others. It's making sure that you're showing up with your positive pants on at all times, which can sometimes be exhausting when you are absolutely exhausted yourself. And also the patience. So it's these unwritten, I guess not rules, but these norms that we kind of just abide by because this is how we have to operate. I think it's really important just to stop for a moment and just reflect and go, wow, there's this beautiful iceberg, but underneath there's so much happening for each and every one of us. So today I really just want to remind each and every one of you that you can't carry everything. And the best piece of advice I was ever given as a leading teacher, as a principal, as someone who sat up in that leadership space, was that not every rock belongs in your backpack. And I think this is something you all know. And like I told you, I'm not going to provide anything groundbreaking for you today, but I really wanted to provide you with a moment to take a step back and go, yeah, that's right. Not every rock does belong in my backpack. So if there's anything you take away from today's session, I want you to sit back and I want you to ask yourself, what can wait? What can be delegated? What can be shared? And what can be let go? Because the reality is we have this rolling list of things to do that we never, ever get to the end of. And sometimes things drop off that list because they're just simply not a priority. When we talk about what can be delegated, this is something that we do in our work as the Bien Collective. We've taken on this model of supporting leadership teams, principals, and also corporate enterprise in helping those high-level managers manage the workload that they can't do on the day-to-day. So outsourcing some of those tasks has been something that's been quite impactful in the respective spaces that we work. And if you're not in a position where you can delegate them outside of your organisation, I really do challenge you to spend some time thinking about who can support you within your team so that you don't have to carry every single one of those rocks in your backpack. But beyond that, I have to say this, and I know I told you this is not groundbreaking stuff. These are just gentle, soft reminders for each and every one of you. But you matter just as much as everybody else. And it's so important to stop for a moment and acknowledge that you can't pour from an empty cup. Hanging up my principal boots, I've recently, stepped into what I would call this corporate world. And I work with a staff member who each and every day makes a point of walking somewhere. Whether it's down, the escalators to the local shops to grab a coffee, to grab lunch, whether it's pausing for 5 minutes just to do a circuit breaker. I feel like in schools we get so tied up in the everyday that this is something that I'm not used to, because I was always like, I can't go for that walk. I can't leave my desk. I've got to deal with that parent. I've got to deal with that teacher. I have to support that student. I have to support that staff member. So I really want you to make sure that on your day-to-days, especially in these last days of the term, that you are stopping first and foremost to fuel your tank. We charge our batteries of our phones every single day. I don't understand why we continue to think we don't need to stop and recharge our own batteries. So stop, have a coffee, have something to eat. Take a walk at some point in the day, even if it's to the photocopier and back. If you're someone who is notorious, and I'll hand up, say that was me, for not leaving on time, make sure that you do that. And at least once a week. Make sure you're asking for help. There is no problem that can't be shared. And if it is all too much, or if it can wait, it's really important to make sure that you say no. I think one thing as leaders, and I guess teachers, we're so selfless that small acts of self-care, we almost, I remember feeling really selfish for stopping and looking after me because I felt like I had to make sure everyone else was okay. So please make sure you do that. But beyond that, it's the ripple that you can't see. And the most powerful ripples are really the ones that people don't always see. So if there's anything that you take away from today, I want you to know that each and every person in this room sees you and they know what you're doing. They know about every conversation, every little word of encouragement where you've stopped to cheer somebody else on, every difficult decision that you've made, every ounce of calm that you've brought to a crisis, whether that be in your classroom, on a school level, on a whole school level, every late night, and every sacrifice that you've made. I know you're tired, and I know that the days are long, and winter doesn't help our moods, but please know that the work that you do does not go unnoticed. To finish off today, I want to leave you with 3 key things and a video, because I just feel like being spoken at is my worst nightmare. So I don't want to take up too much time talking at you. But I think if there's 3 things I want you to take away from today's really brief check-in on your well-being, it's remembering to make sure that you let some things go, because not everything needs your attention. Make sure you're looking after yourself, because you matter too, even if it's that walk to the photocopier. And most importantly, and this is the most incredible message I would love to make sure that you take away from today, it's never underestimate your ripple, the impact that you make. Every drop has a ripple effect, and your positive energy, the work that you do, the impact that you make each and every day does not go unnoticed. If you're sitting there in the leadership space, this is a video that if you haven't seen, I share this all the time, and I used to share it with my staff at the beginning of the year, sometimes in the middle of the year, at the end of the year, just to remind them about the powerful impact that they make. So I'm just going to hit play on this. I've just stopped sharing my screen in its entirety, because I just feel like if you've taken a moment to watch that video, I get so emotional every time I watch it. And I feel like the days are long and the tasks are tough, but it's always such an incredible reminder of the power and the privilege and the honor that we each and every one of us that work in our respective roles in education get to have, and the powerful position that you get to be in to play such an incredible role for these kids. So when you are tired, when you are exhausted, when you feel like you possibly have nothing left in your cup, don't ever forget the impact that you make on your staff and your students each and every day. And if you feel like someone in your circle is tired and they are feeling the true exhaustion that comes with the last few days of the term, share this video with them. And if there's anything that you take away from today, it's just to remember the incredible impact that you make, and the blood and the sweat and the tears. It's not for nothing, because on the end of all of that are these wonderful humans who get to be our students and who we are so privileged to be on their learning journey with. Thanks, everyone.
Melissa, thank you very much. You've made me smile, which
That's
was
good. That was the plan.
fabulous. That was the plan, and some wonderful messages that you shared then. I'm looking forward. I have a few questions for you during Q&A. We've now got Amy Green from the Wellness Strategy. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm just
That's
going to share my
okay.
screen.
Yeah.
For having me. I think that that one line in the video of Britain's Got Talent was the perfect example of joy and chaos, and that sums up school life so perfectly. I've seen that video before, but not taken that phrase away, and I thought, oh, that is school life. I myself was a teacher and a school leader, and I've spent the day in a school today actually working on creating a staff wellbeing framework for a school that I've been doing some deep work with, and that's the core piece of my focus in what I do. I help schools be able to understand and identify what it means when we talk about wellbeing for educators, whether it's for ourselves, whether it's for people that we lead, the teams that we're in, because the idea of staff wellbeing has become such a hot topic, and not just in education, but across corporate as well. And one of the things I always start with is, how do we communicate what wellbeing is? How do we define it? How do we understand it to be for ourselves? Is it different personally and professionally? Is it different at an individual or team level? And if I was to ask those of you today, no matter what your role is or where you work, what's wellbeing, we would get such a range of answers. And whilst there might be similarities in what that is, it's not always the same. And it's certainly not the same person to person, or even season to season in our lives. Moving into winter, I actually live in Queensland. So this morning I was complaining because it was 17 degrees and thinking, oh my gosh, why has summer disappeared? And I'm very aware that that is summer sometimes down in Melbourne and down in Victoria. And I grew up around Canberra, so I know the difference, and lived in London for a few years as well. But we go through these seasons of life and we get attached to them. And then when they change, it's sometimes hard to adjust. And wellbeing is the same. Sometimes we get attached to a version of what we think it should look like, but things underneath change. And so we have to be willing to sometimes negotiate with ourselves, our team, our workplace around, what does well-being look like right now, and how do we come together to define that in a way that allows us not just to feel well. That's one of the most important things. We want to feel well within ourselves, but how do we work well together? How do we team well across our workplace, across our school, and how do we lead well as leaders? So one of the things that I think is often misunderstood when it comes to communicating well-being is understanding that there are two pieces to the puzzle here. We talk about our hedonic or subjective well-being, and then we have eudaimonic and psychological well-being. And when I studied positive psychology, these two areas of well-being were presented as kind of having this to and fro, or is it this or that? And when we looked at it, and what I took away and what I learned is that well-being is not a one-size-fits-all. And it's certainly not just about feeling happy all the time. It's not about making sure we do these self-care activities to pick ourselves up. It has this longer term, sustainable, deep work element to it. But unfortunately, if you Google self-care tips or 10 things I can do for my well-being, what we're often presented with is an approach that leans on hedonic well-being. And this is the quick fix. It's the external. It's often short-term. And what's missed is understanding our eudaimonic well-being. So how do we get that contentment that's sustainable? How do we have meaning and purpose in our life whilst working through the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, but balancing it with hedonic? So what this looks like in real life is, when we have hedonic well-being focuses, we tend to jump to things that are enjoyable. They get instant gratification. We get pleasure-driven activities. We feel comfortable doing them. They're easy. I often think we can outsource these to other people. Sometimes we can pay people for them. It's the morning tea. It's the coffee vans we get into schools, the Friday afternoon takeout, the things that we do when we're feeling flat and tired, especially at end of term, because they're quick and easy and they're going to make us feel good. But the problem is, when we only focus on hedonic well-being, we fall into the trap of leaving ourselves open to what's known as hedonic adaptation. And this is the idea that everything we do under this banner has a use by date or has a period of time that it wears out. This is why we can go on a holiday and get back to work and think, gosh, where did that holiday even go? Did it even make a difference? We can put on a morning tea for staff, but half an hour later, we can hear people going, oh, I wish someone would do something for my well-being. So what we have to shift our thinking to being around and towards is not getting rid of morning teas. We love those things, but also asking ourselves, well, how do we build fulfillment? How do we build meaning? How do we build growth and purpose and connection in the workplace for ourselves and for others? Because for a long time, we've had to focus on these quick fixes or surface level initiatives. And whilst we need them, whilst a yoga class is great, you absolutely cannot downward dog your way out of high workload. It doesn't work like that. And, you know, the amazing chocolate cake we have every Friday doesn't make our inbox disappear. We still have to combat these things together. And sometimes this is why we can feel like we're doing everything right for our well-being and it's just not working. And that was certainly my experience. I was doing everything right for my well-being as a school leader. I was getting up at 5 a.m. I was exercising. I was doing my gratitude journal, my meditation. I was meal prepping and eating the right foods. I was taking my lunch break. I was getting my 10,000 steps in. I was studying and learning. I was putting my hand up for different initiatives. I was leading teams. I was getting my 7.5 to 8 hours sleep every night. And on paper, it looked like I was living the perfect self-care life. The massages and the mani-pedis once a month, making sure I caught up with my friends and I had family time. But when I was going through the motions of this way of living, it was like a checklist. It actually wasn't built on fulfillment or meaning or connection. And so I had adopted this version of well-being that was very checklist, as opposed to ingraining it into my life for how I worked and how I lived. Shift around well-being is understanding that it's not one or the other, and it's not about quick fixes alone. It's about understanding that well-being should fit into the life and the season we're in. That sounds great, but how do we then translate that into the workplace? Because in a school environment, people will ask, but how do you look after my well-being? What does well-being look like if you care for your staff, if you care for your students? And I want to let you know that as leaders, it is not your job to do well-being for someone. It is not your job to rescue someone. It is not your job to fix all of the staff well-being issues that might be popping up. Your job is to make sure that we put conditions in place to ensure staff can achieve these things and a couple more. So what the World Health Organization suggests around well-being and its definition is that mental health is actually a state of our well-being, and there are 4 key areas. People realize their own abilities, so they understand their strengths, what they're good at. And in a workplace, this means letting people work to their strengths. It means knowing our strengths. It means recognizing them. Instead of everyone doing the same thing, we get teams together and we say, hey, who's good at this and who's good at that? And we start to look at workload and task assignment and alignment based on strengths. This can totally shift team dynamic and the energy of how someone shows up. The second piece is coping with normal stresses. Good well-being means we cope with normal stresses. Now, it is the end of term 2, and I guarantee in your schools you're writing reports, and someone on your staff will be all over it. They'll be on top of it. They would have had it done early. They have their assessment schedules. They've started taking notes. They're breezing through it. It's not a stress. And someone in your school is going, oh my God, reports are due. I didn't know. No one told me. How did I not get ready for this? But this person has written reports time and time again. We can approach these normal stresses differently. Our job in schools is to recognize what are the normal stresses, how do we plan for them, and how do we get stress fit? How do we build our emotional health, and how do we build healthy coping and resilience so when the stresses come, whether it's reports, a new student, the start of a school year, a school camp, we've built the foundations to be able to manage these normal daily stresses rather than think, well, if well-being's good, I shouldn't be stressed, because that's not actually how it is. Then the third piece is around productivity. Are we putting conditions in place so people can work well? Do people feel productive? And this has a lot to do with self-determination theory. Are people competent? Are they related in their work? And do they have autonomy where autonomy is appropriate? Alongside our systems and our processes, are we really clear on how things are done? And then the last piece in this definition is contribution to community. Are people showing up? Are they engaged? Are they invested in the work that you're doing, in that shared purpose, in the shared vision? It doesn't mean going above and beyond. It actually means participating. It means sitting in the meeting and being a part of that discussion, not passively sitting back waiting for the meeting to finish. Now, these 4 things speak really well to the workplace. And when I was looking at all of the elements of well-being, whether it is personal or professional, I started to wonder, well, what does this look like then in a school environment if we put staff well-being at the center? Because for a very long time we have, well, really forever, we've talked about students and what students need, and we need to keep that conversation going. But if we neglect to consider what our staff need alongside that and how we lead our own well-being, we are going to end up in a position, perhaps like we're already in, where people don't have the sustainable resources to be able to do the job. So when I was looking at this, I thought, gosh, well, how do we make it digestible for ourselves to understand and to lead wellbeing? How do we communicate this clearly to staff? So this is the framework that features in both of my books, Teacher Wellbeing and Wellbeing Leadership. And there are 2 components to wellbeing: our everyday and our workplace. Our everyday well-being is built through self-efficacy, the belief we can make a difference, and it centers around understanding our own energy and function, having healthy resilience and coping, and emotional regulation and health. These 3 areas are up to us to do. You know, with energy and function, sleep, nutrition, your leader's not coming around to tell you what time to go to bed. You've got to work that out yourself, do some self-parenting. We can regulate our own emotions. We choose our healthy coping and resilience strategies. We've got to build the toolkit for that. We can do some education around that together, absolutely, but ultimately it sits with us to be able to action it. Workplace wellbeing then is around, well, how do we make a great environment that allows people to work well? And the 3 key things that I've identified through looking at different pieces of research around workplaces where well-being was high or was subjectively said to be high from staff was that people felt engaged in their work. They knew what they were doing. They knew why it mattered. They were able to complete their job. They had autonomy. They had competence. They had relatedness through that self-determination theory. People felt productive. They knew what done looked like, so they knew when they could finish and go home and live their life. There were clear systems and processes and clear communication around how things were to be completed. They were able to use time to do those things well. They had conversations about what worked and didn't work, so they were constantly refining, making sure engagement increased and productivity increased. And there was a clear level of performance and growth. We know what success looks like. We know how to do a good job here. We engage in feedback, we have high levels of accountability, and we're growing again to that shared purpose. Those things are actually what underpin workplace wellbeing. And for a long time, we've sat in that space of thinking that it is fed through our hedonic wellbeing around morning teas, gratitude walls, coffee carts, yoga classes. And whilst those things may make a difference in the workplace, we've got to start to ask, well, are these things happening to allow me to do my job well? Because that's where workplace fulfillment can come into it. So over the past 4 years, I have spent time in schools talking to educators and leaders and ground staff and canteen staff and office staff and everyone in between around what does wellbeing look like in the workplace if I was to ask you to talk about what works well, what are your stresses and issues, and what would you like to see done differently? And what I can tell you is that no one ever says they want more morning teas. What they actually want are conditions to be able to do their job well. Everyone in schools wants to be able to do their job well because we all care about the job that requires us to show up even when it's hard, you know, with that joy and chaos combination. And so in the last couple of years where I've been working on collecting qualitative data, not through forms, but through conversation, I've been privy to a lot of information that I think sometimes is not always communicated clearly because we don't ask the right questions. We ask, what's your stress level like? How's your well-being? But I take it one step further by going beneath that surface and going, well, what's causing the stress? What's causing the disconnect? Be really specific about that. And I have identified 3 key areas that are really crucial for everyone in school. So this term educator refers to everyone in a school, leader, teacher, around what is supportive for well-being. So educators really need clarity around what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, what matters. That's where competing priorities can sometimes get in the way of that, or where mixed messaging can also impact that. Educators need consistency. I hear time and time again around how things might be happening different across teams because there's inconsistency around processes. Someone might do something one way, someone does it a different way. That can create the hidden tensions that then get rippled out into stress or things that aren't working well or dysfunctional teams. And educators need meaningful time and support to do their core work well, you included. So the work that actually makes a difference. And in all of the analysis I've done, all of the surveys, all of the conversations, there have been 10 comes to supportive community and leading staff wellbeing that makes a difference. So the 10 themes we have are time to plan, meaningful, engaging learning with ongoing support. This is what our educators in classrooms are asking for. They really want time to plan, to do their job. They want curriculum clarity that reduces cognitive overload, to build confidence so they feel confident in what they're teaching. Behavior and student engagement consistency is number 3. So these are the 3 top things I hear, whether it's from a leader or a staff member or an ESO or teaching aide, around what would impact well-being. Processes and standard operating procedures. So this is how we do things here. This is how it's done. This is the process right from the beginning. Communication. So last minute announcements and interruptions. That's something that can derail well-being. It's not something people are really willing to take on all of the time, and this is what can impact our cognitive overload. It can impact our ability to actually do focus work if we're having to chop and change all the time. Alignment across all levels of leadership. Are our leaders, especially middle leaders, this is where this comes up, on board with what we're doing when it comes to communicating how things are done and leading different teams. Professional learning that's practical, ongoing, embedded. So making sure we're giving time for professional learning to be implemented and integrated before we jump to the next thing. Reducing administration and clutter and unnecessary tasks. Now, I hear this all the time, but what I can tell you is that it is different in every school. What your administrative clutter or unnecessary tasks might be identified as, so the things we can offload, would look different to the school next door to you, because we have different ways of working and functioning and processes and systems and class sizes and specialist teachers and timetables and student numbers. That impacts all of these things. Role expectations and visibility of success. What's my role and how do I know when I'm doing it well? We might think that's very simple for a teacher, but actually it's so big and vague and complicated that to lead wellbeing, we need to be able to communicate that. And the same for us. What's success for me? At the end of the day, how do I know what success looks like? One of my favorite quick tips to do for this is, instead of getting to the end of every day and writing a to-do list, writing a ta-da list. Ta-da, look at what I achieved today, because we can be so hard on ourselves, telling ourselves we haven't done enough and I didn't get to this and I should have done that and I said I was going to do this and I didn't do that. And I promise you, no matter how long you feel that to-do list is, your ta-da list is bigger than you realize. And this is a great thing to recognize. There's always things we've achieved. So don't let that get overridden by the to-do list that never ends, because it never ends. That's just something we have to accept. And then lastly, how do we connect to our work and not feel distanced from it? So how are we making sure that we still have ownership over our decisions? We're still being thoughtful in those things, that we still actually have an impact there. Educators want to see leaders in those spaces as well, not just being distant from that or seeing them in a staff meeting once a fortnight. They want to know, they want people in their meetings with them. They want people in their planning with them. They want to know that you're in there doing it too. So this is a snapshot of what actually has come out from a conversation with over 1,000 educators. We could even be up to 2,000 by now. What does it mean to lead and communicate staff wellbeing well? So what we really highlight is this clarity, consistency, and support. Do I have clarity on what I'm doing? Do I have consistency? And do I have support around that? And these 3 things can underpin all elements of staff wellbeing. Now, if you want that report, you can scan this QR code. So you should be able to do that now. If you have any issues, you can just email me at the end, but that's a way to capture that report and see the 10 main themes that have come out around staff wellbeing, as well as what to do about it, some ideas. But I want to leave you with this final thought. Leading wellbeing for yourself or for others is actually a combination of head and heart. And sometimes we can let the heart override the head, or the head override the heart. What I mean by that is we can get caught up in the feeling good and feeling happy and feeling safe all of the time, but without actually thinking through the structure and the process and the clarity and the communication, it can get undone quickly because we haven't made it clear. So when we're talking about supporting staff wellbeing, our own wellbeing, leading wellbeing, educator wellbeing, even student wellbeing, we've got to know, whilst we care and we want to do a great job, we still have to put structure around it, because otherwise we're leaving it to chance. And in the case of leading our own wellbeing, we need to become the architects and designers of what wellbeing looks like personally and professionally for us, because without that, we're just wishing, waiting, and hoping. And one of my great mentors says, wishing, waiting, and hoping is not a strategy. And so with that, we've got to do some really intentional work around what does wellbeing look like for us. Thank you so much. That is the end for me. If you do need anything, these are my bits and pieces, but it's been a delight to be able to share that really quickly for 15 minutes. So I'm going to hang around for Q&A now.
Thank you very much, Amy. That was amazing. And you did manage to put so many things into that presentation. Melissa, can I ask you, one of the things that struck me when you spoke was talking about positive pants. We have a saying at Talbot Primary School that we exercise our flexible pants lots of the time, but putting the phrase positive pants together, it gives it a different sort of lens, in that you're not expecting or you're not looking for change or having to move things around. You're actually going to face what's coming up with positivity and already sort of assuming success, I suppose. Is that a way of explaining it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that glass half empty, glass half full scenario. So when I sat in that chair, I would always say to people, you know, we're going to focus on the solution, not the problem. And the best way to focus on the solution is with positive energy. So positive pants are a very important part of everything that we do. But yes, essentially, yes, you've captured the essence of that very, very well. Correct.
Okay, perfect. I'm wondering whether we had the same mentor, because I definitely have the what can wait, be delegated, be shared, and be let go. That's been a motto of mine for many years. I'm going to give just a school example at the moment that's probably particular to Talbot Primary, but I can see that there are some other small school leaders on here today. When you have so many things going on, and in particular, we're in the middle of some building works at the moment. So our staff room's been uprooted, and our meeting room is non-existent at the moment. Those kind of spaces where we would usually retreat to revive and recharge and have that time away from our learning environments isn't accessible to us. Have you got any sort of things that we could do or create, or I don't know, just somehow to take a breath in the middle of the day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like the first thing I just have to acknowledge is that I'm fully aware that as, you know, educators in small schools, you're often wearing 14 different positions of responsibility as well as the everyday teacher role. So you are sometimes 8, 9, 10 people that in a mainstream larger school that's metro have, you know, multiple humans doing the work that you're doing. So I feel like I just have to acknowledge all of the people that have joined us today that sit in those roles as the one person waving 14 flags. But I think the best piece of advice that I've ever been given, and this has often very much worked for me, and I did this when I did my VAPA, which is obviously, you know, people know to become a principal, you have to do your VAPA, and I had to do the emotional intelligence and do the psychology component of that. And it was that music is one of the quickest way to change your mood. So there's 3 things. I feel like I'm not going to remember them all off the top of my head because I wasn't going there, but there's music, there's 2 others. We'll Google them later and I'll flick them out to you, but pop some music on. And I even found myself, I worked from home today, and I had music going all day, and it just changes everything about your day. It changes your intention, it changes your mood. When you start to, you know, fade out, a good song comes on and you bop and you move. So if you can't access your staff room because it's the only room that you've got and it's being renovated, jump on Spotify and pop on an 80s banger is what I'm going to say. 100%. They always lift the mood instantly. If it comes from the 80s, it's going to do it instantly.
Perfect advice. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to try that tomorrow when I go back in. Amy, when you were talking about high levels of accountability, reducing stress or increasing well-being, were you relating that? So we've just gone through our mid-cycle chats for our professional development process, and every one of the teachers sort of went away or came back the next day and said, you know, we're feeling renewed purpose. We've sort of aligned our goals again. Was that what you were meaning, in that they just sort of streamlined their thinking, or were given that moment to appreciate what they had done and what was next?
Yeah, I get it's that alongside we have integrity with those things. So sometimes we can put great plans in place, or we can have goals or targets and we lose touch with them, or we don't actually deliver them with the integrity we designed or maybe thought we would have to begin with. And I know sometimes in Australia the word accountability can negative connotations, or people don't necessarily love that word. And I actually think we need to embrace the word accountability, because we talk about things like autonomy or support, and those things can't happen unless we have accountability alongside it. Because really we're saying, this is what done looks like for you. This is how you know you've done a good job. And we can't support people unless we have accountability measures in place as well. So it's not about micromanaging or checking. It's actually about people being open enough to engage in dialogue professionally, whether it's around what's happening in their classroom, at a team level, around strategic planning, goals, etc., to be able to go, this is what we said we'd do. Maybe we have done it, maybe we haven't done it. And so what accountability and support measures might we need to actually be able to function at that high performance level? Now, high performance doesn't mean exhausting. It just means these we decided for this piece of work or for this task, or if we're introducing a new reading program or a new unit plan design, what are the accountability measures? And sometimes teams can set this for themselves, or individuals can set this for themselves, so that we don't lose touch with those things that we know are actually going to drive and help well-being through how we work. Because when we lose touch or don't actually have those things in place, this is where we can get that disconnect from that lack of integrity around those things.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, ladies, that was an amazing session, and I've taken heaps from that. I'm sure everyone that's watching will have as well. I'm going to pass to Tim Warwick. Now, Tim Warwick is part of the Equity Alliance, and I've worked a little bit with Tim in his space, and Tim's going to tell us a little bit about the very important and authentic work that he and his team are doing, and then share his pod pick with us. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, thanks, Tess, and hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday, and I'm sure everyone's feeling happy that it is the penultimate week of your school terms. Hope you're going well. And yeah, great to see Tess in this forum. I'll share a bit about the work we get to do with Tess in a second. But also wonderful to hear that great work around staff wellbeing, and really anchoring in purpose. That's at the heart of the work of the Alliance. I'm also a previous teacher in school pre, and I spent nearly 10 years on Yorta Yorta country in Shep. These are some of my wonderful students, and probably are at the heart of what I think of when I think of purpose and why I did the work that I did. But I also want to use this as a way of acknowledging country. I now live and work on Wurundjeri country, but I always like to shout out this lot who taught me a huge amount about what it is to be a good human being, but also what it is to work towards education equity. I'm going to just share quickly a bit about our work today and how we're working towards greater education equity in our system, but also then do a bit of a plug for our podcast. You'll all be familiar with the Alice Springs Declaration, which sets our education system's vision for itself. And as it says there, this is a vision where every student achieves their potential. But you'll also be aware that we have a system that has some barriers to achieving that. And that is certainly true when it comes to our rural and regional communities. And in the case of the Education Equity Alliance, we're particularly focused also on low SES school communities. So those communities that are serving a significant proportion of their students from a low SES background. And our vision is one where we do achieve that equity. And in particular, what we believe is most critical to doing that is that we activate our students and teachers from these communities as partners in systems change for education equity. How do we actually do that? We do two key things. We, first of all, do some school-facing work. So we have a school network. This is open to all schools that serve, have an ICSIA below 1,000. This is kind of the core work that we do. So we bring together those schools every term to enable greater connection around shared priorities and purpose. We do professional learning around adaptive leadership to gain clarity on what will matter most for our school communities and the equity that we're endeavouring to achieve. And we also celebrate. We believe there's great strengths happening across our school communities, and so a core part of everything we do when we bring together schools is allowing them to share their practice, share the the improvements they're achieving for their communities, because there's so much we can learn from our low SES schools. And I've just got here on the next slide, this just gives you a sense of the work. And sorry, I'm going to have to go really quick today, but hopefully you can take a quick pic of that. But this is our set of leverage points. So a leverage point is an area where if you apply some effort, you may see the greatest return. And this will differ from community to community. So whenever we come together as a network, we often get this out and have a think about what is this looking like for our school communities. Lots of this will make sense to you. Lots of this will be things that you're working very hard on in your own school communities. But we developed this with the network. This has come from these leaders and teachers about what matters most for their low SES school communities, and we think provides a great kind of snapshot of what really matters in this work. And then the second thing that we do, because it was really interesting hearing Amy talk about the conditions that we need to get right for teachers and leaders and educators to do their work in schools. And there's certainly, you all are doing really important work to shift those conditions for your educators. But let's be a little honest here, that there are some things about our system, and that's the system is not just the department, it's all the kind of NGOs, it's other departments, it's communities. It's about how we're working collectively towards this goal of education equity that actually makes some of that work really hard and harder than it needs to be. And so what we've gone and done is bring together a group of peak education equity stakeholders who are up for working differently and more collaboratively to try and shift that inequity. We just call them the collective. It's this awesome group of organisations here. You'll be familiar with lots of those, and hopefully some of those are providing supports into your communities. And this is where Tess comes in, they have a wonderful leadership council, which is very purposely an intergenerational council. So it brings together young people, educators, and leaders from across those organisations. A bit of a plug, that great group of humans is hosting our Achieving Education Equity gathering on the 30th of July. There's information about it on our website, which is just educationequityalliance.com.au, and we can flick that info around after this as well. This will be a couple of hundred educators, NGOs, government, philanthropy, and young people spending the day on what matters most. The three kind of priorities over on the right there will be the focus of the day around what might make the biggest difference for low SES communities. Now I've done a bad job of my timing, so I got 1 minute on my pod pick, but my pod pick is our podcast. So we've been running a podcast this year, which has been tons of fun. You'll find lots of really rich discussions anchored in lived experience of teachers and school leaders. And then we've also been joined by some wonderful guests that you'll see there, like Professor Sharon Goldfeld on child-focused education systems. Sharon is a paediatrician who's worked in and around schools for her whole journey and believes in bringing together health, wellbeing, and education really effectively and collaboratively. Ben Perks and Megan Corcoran there on trauma-informed. That should be trauma-proofing education, not trauma-professing education. I don't know what trauma-professing education would be, but trauma-proofing education, and then a whole heap of others. So please feel free. You can find that on any good platform. Just look up Achieving Education Equity and you'll find it. But a big thanks for having me along. And yeah, love the work that CEP does. Should have shouted out CEP. They're one of these great member organisations working more collaboratively on education equity. So big thanks.
Thank you, Tim. And that concludes the speakers and presentations. I'm going to hand back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Tess. A reminder that the survey is in the chat room. I notice some people are leaving, and so we would appreciate the feedback. If I just share a little experience that I had, I think when I was a principal of P12 College many years ago, and what was important to me was to have, to my health and satisfaction, was to have a critical friend or a mentor in a similar setting, so that there was somebody I who was also a principal of a P12 school, and obviously the problems in a small rural school is different to a larger rural setting. So you find somebody who's got some experience, whose opinion you value, and that you can talk to and talk through issues with. And I found that to be tremendously important. Particularly if I found somebody in the opposite sector that I was familiar with, like I was secondary, so it was really critical to have a primary leader who could support me in that area. So there's always one area where we do need support, and to find that critical friend, I think, is very important. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment about that. We've got a couple of minutes left.
I definitely agree, Gary. So I know that I was allocated a mentor when I went into my first year as principal from a similar setting, but I also accessed through the academy, I was allocated another mentor that was less about growth planning and more about how are you going right at this minute. In this minute, what is it that you need advice on, or what's happening in your school? And it was more of a real connection, shared connection, and just a sharing of practice and ideas. So I think there's like those two options. You can look for a mentor who's more of a coach and more of a growth-minded one, but you can also look for that mentor that's just really there if things are not going well, or to celebrate the things that are going well. Just
And I
as
think
important.
too,
And to be critical, not just to say, oh, you're doing a fantastic job, to really give you some constructive suggestions and support.
I call it the pulse check, someone who checks my pulse, because sometimes you hear something, you see something, you get that head and heart clash and you go, I'm going to be reactive. So someone that, can go, no, Mel, you're not overreacting, or wow, yeah, that is intense. Let's talk this through. So I couldn't agree more, Gary. That's incredible advice.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your contribution today. And again, I remind you about the survey in the chat room. And could I also remind you that session 4 on the 24th of June is something that I really want to learn about. It's neurodiversity in rural schools. So thank you all very much. And we look forward to seeing you. And don't forget, you can always access the recording, not only of this session, but also previous sessions. So we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you.